Yeah, oh, I owe you all a video. So let's go. Really gotta sit down and watch some anime for the night. A little bigger video. Kind of random things probably for you. Tomorrow I hinted at and actually used one of the items that I'll be covering, which is these interesting sanding sticks. You can see trackball shmoo all over one there. That's not what we're doing today. We're doing this big box B&H photo video. Y'all probably have seen that in the background of multiple. Oh no, I almost grabbed the Tuck HD here. Thanks to Frozen Slate, we have the letter openers back. And it's really quite sharp, except for way up on the tip there. Which we'll get next time, I swear. Oh, and way on the back I noticed too. But it's sharp. Oh, like sharp enough to start cutting the box rather than the tape. Jab, 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 jab. Let's get this in frame. 0.5. Let's hope I didn't get scammed for leaving this for a month, because this was delivered. Shipped date was July 18th of 2025. Guys, open your packages sooner. I gotta trust B&H here, though. We have a box. Inside of the box. Let's remove the box. Oh, it's heavy. Didn't expect it to be that heavy. Ooh. What does that say? Intel Arc B580 Limited Edition graphics box. It's only the box. Oh, I screwed up. No, JK. Gotta get it out of the box. That's what we gotta do. To do that, we need the letter opener. Just gotta hype that sucker every time. Seriously, this thing actually has a nicer edge on it. We did unintentionally change the profile. I think this is 25 degrees. It must have been much wider. And that may have explained why I couldn't get it sharp. Because it's not like it has bad steel. But QB knife is definitely like a Chinese, you know, like your average Chinese knife brand. This cost, I think, like $80. That's not due to the quality of the steel, I'll tell you that, okay? It's not bad steel, it's just like, you can buy knives at Walmart probably for $20 to $40 that have equivalent quality steel to what this says. It's just really cool. I need to get some, it's a jazz called paracord on there. If you think back, I should have had a video up where I bought shit. It wasn't the ASRock one. It was one of the specialized Intel brand, like Gunnier. I don't think I bought the Gunnier one. Onyx was what it was, and then it turned out it didn't physically fit in my computer case because it wasn't a 2-slot, and I need a true 2-slot B580. Well, that one got returned. Newegg did have a good return policy on that, unlike during the COVID era when they basically gave you the middle finger. Jesus, is on there tight. Did I cut this? I cut this. So I returned it, and actually for the I shouldn't even say for the same, any less money. Intel actually discontinued these. They must have gotten one last batch. Holy shit, this sleeve is... Sleeve isn't fucking on there. That's not budging. Oh. Yeah. Tear this for the seal. I've never seen a seal like that on a graphics card in my life. Like a seal on the side of the... That's a sharp blade. Don't grab the blade. That's what I get for using a knife. Or I should be using one of my little portable pry bars. Just throwing this away right away. Yeah, that's where I'm like, oh, I can't get out of the box. It's because... Yeah. Look at that. Much better. Yeah, I am not sure on this. We could check if they're still selling that. But from my understanding, Intel discontinued the limited edition Intel branded Intel Arc B580. I don't even know if they made B570s. They're still in stock at B&H. So if you guys want one, $249, which is retail price, and that's why I didn't have an Intel Arc sooner. Is because I refused to pay more. It looks like Best Buy has the limited edition in stock too. I swear they said they discontinued and or stopped producing the well, I say that. We can just ask. This is a Google, I bet. When did Intel discontinue the limited edition Intel Arc B580? Maybe I got that wrong then. Maybe they're talking about the 750. Because the Gemini says the June 27th, which would line up very close to when I ordered this, was actually the A750. Now, not going to do any more research than what we just did. So maybe I got that confused. This has a kind of cool box. Reminds me of Razer. It presents itself. There's a whole crap ton of paperwork with... Hey, you guys know how you save some money with producing this? you don't do all this. And I'm pretty sure the like this looks like an Intel NUC box, but like for graphics card. Quick start guide. By now, the Intel Arc graphics drivers have actually been split off from the Intel Xe graphics drivers. So if you have an 11th to 14th gen Intel CPU, or any of the other stuff that had Xe graphics, I'm trying to think if they had dedicated cards for that. It was weird because they were just starting to do that before Arc. So if you have 11th to 14th gen, basically, you now have a separate driver and you're only getting security updates. Oh, they basically give you a little microfiber cover. I don't know how much use it. That's just more of a pretty. Look at that thing. That is matte black if I've ever seen matte black, and I've seen some matte black in my life. Now that there, minus those shrouds, or I guess it would be the shroud, like the extended fan shroud around the fans. That is a true 2-slot graphics card. Look at that. Minus, like I said, that little lip right there. But I think there is a small gap between cards in PCI config. You can kind of see it there in the middle. So this is going to be a much better fit. Oh, they closed in the ends of the fan blades. That can actually be very advantageous. Because you're stopping the... it will focus the flow much more significantly this way through the fins rather than letting it go out the edges. The thing is when you do this, this is like, well, then why doesn't Noctua do it? Well, because you lose that much blade length by doing that. You gain a ton of rigidity, though. And you're like, why do you pick Noctua? Because they're like the go-to with the goat with the fans, you know? I mean, like, this thing is matte. Somehow they made it matte black, where when even my greasy-ass hands touch it, it doesn't immediately fingerprint up. A good job on the finish there, that's for sure. That is like a friggin' radiator. I mean, it's a heat sink, but like, compared to that, the one I had here, this is built beautifully. Like, this feels like a reference NVIDIA card compared to, like, the other thing felt like a budget low-end. This is probably far better built than it needs to be. And that is kind of, once I saw that these were in stock at the basic, I think this was actually cheaper than what I originally paid. I'm like, for my setup, this is going to work much better because I do have to wedge it in there. And actually, the other one I tried to fit because I was so pumped. Like the prices, these had just come back in stock. Prices had just come down, and I'm like, I'm getting one. Squares is like, do you really need another graphics card? And the answer to that was no, but yes, because I used to have a 3050 in my desktop as the secondary GPU in there, right? I say used to because that got pulled out and put in the repair PC, right? Well, I don't actually know if it's in there yet. Might be over one of the shelves over here. No, the 1650's over here. So, back when I had the 3080 Ti in my desktop, having the 3050 in there was perfect, right? But then once we went to the 4070 Ti on the desktop to get that, in modern games, 4070 Ti might actually be like a hair quicker, just due to its better support of more modern technology than a 3080 Ti. And when it comes to grunt, the 3080 Ti is definitely better. But when it comes to actual in-game performance, they're basically trading blows. And then if you can use the newer DLSS and especially frame gen on the 4070 Ti, as much as you guys are like, oh, fake frames, it actually does help. Especially like I said, my limit's kind of like 100 frames. So if I can get the base frame rate to 100 frames and then I throw on the multi-frame gen, there we go. We now have, because my monitor can do up to 240 frames, and there ain't no way in hell I'm pushing 240 FPS in, say, Call of Duty with anything that I own. This could have gone in the desktop as a backup if I needed it to. This is an MSI 1650, not a Super, not a Ti, the OG 1650. And this specific model, the reason why I got it, actually has dual display ports. A lot of these would have had VGA still, HDMI display port. Or, as you can see there, that's actually a DVI solder joint there. Some of them might have had DVI. But because I was using this on a repair PC where I had one, but now, and actually knew at the time of buying this I would have two, I've found one of these. Also, this was the same price as the base PNY one. Was this nice? And this is actually an overclocked one as well. Twin Frozer 7 MSI. There you go. Gaming X. And you're like, why do you want a 1650? That thing's potato. Well, it actually has the same media engine as the Volta, the Titan V. And those never made it to the consumer market, basically, like that engine. So it actually has a really good multimedia engine in it. It's kind of like how the 750 and the 750 Ti were actually first gen Maxwell. Like there were 800 series cards, even though there were 700 series cards. 800 series cards were only in mobile, except for the 750 and 750 Ti, and maybe some stuff in the enterprise, either workstation or server class stuff. But yeah, so this is going to be my secondary card in my desktop. And you're like, oh, why do you need one? Well, I don't right now. I only have 3 monitors, right? It's going to go in there below that 4070 Ti. I do have a thin widescreen monitor in here. Right there. All right, see it says, some of you might have seen that before. It's like one of those ultra-wide ones. Turns out Corsair actually sells one of those now for something crazy like $250. I don't know if they didn't stock many of them or if it just sold out like crazy. But that is a crazy price. I might have spent $200 on that. And that's a 4K, like 3840 by 1080, I think it is. It's like half of a 4K screen instead of 2160, I believe. Most of these, and I think the Corsair one is one like this, where it's got a width of 1080, like a width. Might be a little bit higher, but comparatively, spec-wise, potato compared to that. There was another guy in the LTT Anime Club that did pick up like a slightly downgraded version of the. If you want one of these, you do want to go with, and you get them off of AliExpress. They use the Wise Coco is the brand you want, and you want to make sure you get it from their factory shop. They have first hand and third hand, like it's like basically A grade and then like B grade panels. So like they might have an issue. Now with tariffs, that's going to be rough. They do have some of the Wise Cocos on Amazon. They are obviously more expensive because somebody's already imported and pre-made tariffs on it. That is one of the things that the Intel Arc B580 over here is going to be running. And then the other thing is not down here, but imagine down here if that light was not there. My plan is to hit it up on Black Friday and get myself as big of a TV as I can put on the wall behind my monitors, and then angle it down so that when you're here, you can look up there and see nice big TV. Like we're talking ideally like a 75-inch. Just needs to be 4K, support HDR, support gaming mode. Literally don't care about anything else. I mean, I'll calibrate it to be as close as I can to, realistic. Where this comes from is I've done some work from the couch before, working on the laptop, and it's great to just have something either up there playing, like a YouTube video, or if I'm referencing documents, or like, I'm sure some of you, I mean, maybe nowadays you might use a tablet, but like back when I was doing keyboard building over here, these really do need to flip spots. But I'd have my laptop off to the side, or even when I was doing it up in the office before I had this space down here, I would have a desktop right in front of me, and I would look it up on the monitor and put it up there. Having something that I can put a reference material up on a big monitor that I can see from, like, leaning back in my chair across the room, or even that other people in the same room can reference, super duper duper handy. And we do not need anything quality for that. I think Linus had that recent video where they did Scrapyard Wars, and he was able to get a 75-inch and a soundbar for like under 300 USD. I forget how much it was Canadian. So, like I said, literally just looking for something that takes an HDR signal, has a game mode. The reason why I want the game mode, ideally get VRR in there because all these other panels are capable. All these other ones are HDR. That's why I want that as well. And then 4K. I'm not going to be gaming on that. Maybe we'll play we could play Rocket League or other games you might play on controller and sit back on, but that is not the point. For doing that, we got a TV in the basement, right? Just for playing the YouTube videos, for throwing up either reference videos, having those real big on a nice big screen, or reference documents or guides. A lot more things lately have been finally starting to switch into horizontal, but that's actually why I run portrait on the left, is because like your PDFs, your Word documents, they're all vertical. Yeah, so that's what this guy, the other thing it's going to be doing is, yes, I have a 4070 Ti. Some of this plan was correct before I had that, but this has AV1 encoding. And actually, from my experience, Intel's AV1 encoding is more supported than NVIDIA's. Weird. Adobe still just doesn't support hardware encode and decode on NVIDIA for AV1. Don't know why. So I'm interested in doing AV1 encoding and having that acceleration with this. The other thing is supposedly this can still do quick sync, which used to be on their on-die, like even pre-XE CPUs, right? So that's the H.264. Some of it can even do H.263. Some of the newer ones can do H.265 or HEVC, right? So QuickSync, the thing is with QuickSync is sometimes it's even faster than having a dedicated NVIDIA GPU with CUDA acceleration, because stuff like maybe now, but especially back in the day, Adobe didn't use the NVENC, like the hardware encode decode engines that are in the NVIDIA GPU over there, right? Or the NVIDIA GPU over there, or the NVIDIA GPU over there, right? So what I am interested in is having this as a secondary and potentially using, and basically using it as an acceleration card. I'm going to have it running that little display, especially at first, and then, the big old monitor or the big old TV later. I think it only has the one HDMI. Yeah, it only has the one HDMI, which is probably what I'll run the TV off of. Now, it should be noted that due to constraints with Linux, if the B580 is like the A750, even the HDMI port on it is not native HDMI. And that is because the HDMI is not fully open source, so it cannot be included in like some Linux distros or the Linux graphics driver or something weird like that. AMD runs into that all the time. So what Intel did to avoid that was effectively inside or on the PCB of the GPU, that is actually a fourth DisplayPort output that they have like a dongle or like they have a chip converting the DisplayPort signal to an HDMI signal. Now that caused issues early on the Windows side. But without that implementation on the Linux side, you wouldn't have even had HDMI out. And apparently that is still something that AMD users fight to this day. So that's how Intel worked around it, is technically that HDMI port in hardware is actually a display port that's been converted. Wendell over at Level 1 Text has talked about that. Apparently it's a very good implementation. It's just that I don't know if it'll do VRR over the HDMI. I would have to check. Like, there's just some like weird limitations of it. They might have overcome those by now as well. But a lot of that was to get better, what do you want to say, Linux support. Right, that's another thing that could be done with this, is if I wanted to fart around with dual booting and actually run desktop Linux, I could run it on there, right? Because any of the gaming or any of the Adobe stuff is going to happen in Windows. We're going to want the NVIDIA card for that, right? But this could be running the Linux side if needed and be plenty powerful. Like, it should be noted, this is probably as powerful, or I think more powerful technically, than the card I got my brother, which was my old 3060 12 gig. $250. You know, like, unless your game is a known issue with this card and you're at that base price of the market, right? And especially if you're willing to kind of play around with it a little bit, right? This is a great price. Like, it punches above its $250 price point. Remember, it was taken on the 4060. I think the 5060's like prices came down a little bit with it, and performance obviously went up. But performance of this has been shooting way up recently, as well as Intel. Apparently, a lot of their overhead has been software. And also, I think what's been helping is a lot of the systems that these have been going in have been newer and newer and newer, because they need rebar. They need certain hardware instructions. Otherwise, they're designed for a new system. Like, another big thing with the B580, I believe that even the 770, 750 before it, is that your performance degradation from going from 1080p to 1440p almost non-existent, which is finally becoming the truth or a thing, because ASRock, for example, has some very good IPS gaming panels, right? They are 135 for the 1080p, and what is the 1440p 27-inch variant? 145. So, like, there is no price, and you're like, oh, that's the only one, blah blah. Nope, I have literally seen multiple sub $200. Actually, I think there were 3 models that were like in the 155, 165, and I mean, we're talking 1080p monitors are still up to probably 150 for a decent. Now you can play way more than that. And I would say still on average, like, if you're going to a Best Buy and not watching for deals, you're probably still spending $300 for a 27-inch 1440p 10-bit HDR IPS, like 180 hertz. Now it's 180. It used to be 165. Before that it was 144. You know, but it's at 180 hertz now. You're still probably spending about upwards of 300. The ASRock panel that I'm talking about actually is a like $275, $280 monitor if you get it with its original highly adjustable stand. But yeah, you get like $100 off plus for not getting that stand. And what you should do is, I think it's Huano, Huwano. Ask me on our Discord, link down below, if you need some good cheap monitor arms. You can get them for like $40 to $60 for one with a pipe. And the one over here is not it because they were out of stock. This is a cheaper one, like literally the same price, but just not as good. But something like this, and this is a dual arm. So you got a double jointed arm with a pull that it comes out of. You can get something like that for $40 to $60 for a single monitor arm. It's more on the 40 end if you only want the single arm, if you want the dual jointed, which you should. But think about that. You're saving $100 and you could just put it, either use the shit stand and put it on a ream of paper or an old textbook, or fuck it, your graphics card box, right? That's what we did for my brother with his PC build, right? And even my dad had plans to get a monitor arm like that, buy a second monitor, and slap it on a monitor arm like that, because once you have monitor arms, you never go back. So you're better off just taking that nice savings and get the shit stand and just buy a monitor arm. But yeah, so it's finally, things are finally coming. We're like, because of Windows 11, the base system that this is going to be installed in, this B580, is going up, where the base specs and the base like technologies that the base hardware system that this requires is getting closer, right? And also that the 1440p monitors, finally, the 1440p traction, as in the percent of 1440p growth, has outgrown the decrease in 1080p, meaning that we're getting more 1440p users than we're losing 1080p users, right? And we're finally hitting that turning point where it really isn't that much more to go and get yourself a 1440p monitor versus a 1080p monitor. Now, you do have to do a little bit of looking still, right? But if you do, and I'm sure if you got to do a bit of looking for it, soon you won't, right? And 1080p monitors have now kind of gotten on the barest minimum, shittiest ones down to about $80 for the longest time. Like, we're talking decade plus. They were always like $100, maybe 120 way back in the day. But it was always that, and now they're down to 80. Whoop-de-doo. So it's like they've hit a point where, kind of like hard drives, where SSDs have finally gotten cheaper than hard drives, because on a hard drive, even if you get a laptop drive, right? If we go over here and take a look at a hard drive, here's a laptop drive. Here's a 750 gig black that's still good. I think I got a stack of 4 of them there. That used to be what Chibi PC had inside of it before I could afford an array of 2 terabytes and then later 2 terabyte SSDs, which now Frozen Slate has. But this thing, even if we go to, now this is a 7200 RPM, we might have, there's a 500, what's that guy, 320? Scorpio Black. Is that a terabyte? I don't think they ever made these in a terabyte. 2011. Whew, that's a 15-year-old hard drive, guys. Jeez. There's another 750. So I used to have an array of 4 of these, because that was the fastest you could get that much storage in. At the time, like a big SSD was 500 gigs and it cost $300. And that was cheap. But now, right, so this got down to about $35 for a laptop drive. You know, maybe about the same for something like this, except it wouldn't be a 4 terabyte, it'd be a 1 terabyte, because there's only one platter in there. That thinner posture though, right? Didn't realize I just had 4 terabyte drives vibing around here. Something like this though, that's even if we don't go to something like this, we just go to a SATA SSD, which we got a stack of. Here, I'll grab this. Grab this guy here. And take a look at this. This is metal. You could make that out of plastic. And then a lot of these, there's a screw hole like here. So the drive actually only goes halfway, and then they went to a third of the way down. So there's just less physical shit in an SSD, right? And then you go from these with plastic enclosures, with, you know, PCBs that are only a third of the size of the enclosure, down to an NVMe like this, right? You can get some NVMe's, I think I've seen them as low as $8. And because some of these get even farther than this is, where it's only one chip. Like the controller, the NAND, and there is no DRAM cache because they use the system memory as the DRAM cache. That's kind of where we're at with monitors, is what I'm kind of getting at, is to the point where $80 is about as cheap as they can do new a 1080p monitor, just because there's like physical shit to it, and they have to put it in a box and get it to you, right? Like, it's kind of like the same thing with TVs. No matter how shitty they are, they unless it's like overstock, old stock, or used, or they don't go below a certain price because there's just a certain amount. Sometimes even the logistics of getting it to you might be more than the product is, right? So that's where we're at, where finally, after all this time, not only has the adoption rate of finally people are moving on from 1080p, and you're like, but the PS4 was a 4K console. No, it wasn't. People didn't have 4K yet. It hadn't been standardized. Now, you could argue that people now, the majority of people, at least of new TVs purchased probably in the last 3 years or so, have been 4K. Actually, I've been out of Best Buy for 5 years, so I'd say 5 years, right? Because like you basically couldn't buy a 1080p TV anymore, right? Thing is the default monitor still sold is 1080p. The default laptop resolution, probably actually 1366 by 768 still, because you're looking at those $500 and less. At $500, you're probably getting 1080p, right? But you know, at the $300 price point, you're getting not a resolution. 1366 by 768 isn't 16 by 9. It's not anything. What it is the old standard was 1024 by 768. So there's a minimum height, right, to that. Like that's the minimum resolution for Windows. And because they had to made it widescreen, they kept the 768-bit, right, the minimum height, and they just made it wide with 1366 by 768. It is garbage. I used to see 17-inch laptops with that resolution. Horrible. So we're finally away from that mess, right? And so that's also what's here is our platform's getting better to better take advantage of like rebar and all the other things that the tech in here is based around, right? Because if they're going to build a new architecture, they're not going to base it on old tech. They want to base it on, hey, yep, we know we're going to have growing pains. We want to be competitive on Gen 3, and we want to have a lasting impression on Gen 5, effectively, right? The other thing is finally, this was also designed for higher resolutions. I think due to Corona Chan happening, and the entire market just getting bought out with monitors, right? And that affecting the economy still to this day, that this progression of monitors of resolution was delayed longer than Intel had expected, because we have been at this sort of 1080p going down and 1440p going up at the same rate for like a number of years, like quite some time. Like we were on the precipice of this 1440p taking over as the resolution that everybody's moving to, right? At least for gaming. And the reason why that kind of happens in gaming is, as much as consoles, PS5, Xbox Series say they can do 4K gaming, they might not even be doing 1080p gaming. natively with all the upscaling and everything, right? Whereas gamers with, like, I talked about multi-frame generation or single frame generation, right? They're like, those are fake frames. So they're much more likely to run native, want at least your 60 FPS consistent on a PC versus, on a console, where they want, like, some stuff is finally going to 60 FPS. But traditionally, like, they want a locked 30. They would rather have the resolution drop and keep these higher resolution textures, like the render resolution would drop. That's how it would happen on the PS4, PS5. And that's where DLSS comes from, effectively, is they were doing this resolution scaling just not via the hardware, but via the software and the CPU for, generations already. Like, you think, oh, the Xbox 360 is a 1080p console. No. If I recall, most things might be 540p or something like that on there. And that's a 2x scale resolution, right? I don't remember exact. You can call me out there, right? But that's why everybody's not jumping to 4K. If you as somebody who plays and has gamed in 4K since I got that monitor over there, which is that was before HDR was even a thing. Very high-end ProArt PA329Q. Kind of do wish I got the 328. Then later on, they did come out with an HDR variant of that, which is like the P329QH. They basically, it's $50 more, and they got it certified for HDR, or $100 more. I'm like, okay, so where can I give you my $50 to get the HDR cert for that, so it'll show up in Windows properly? Because it's the same panel. Same panel. Grumpy me. And I was fine with 60 hertz, right? Then we had those 27-inch IPS Asus displays. That was when we finally got gaming displays that were good enough to be creative displays. However, boo 27-inch. Do not buy 27-inch 1440p. I only did that because I could buy three 27-inch 1440p for the cost of three 27-inch 4Ks for the cost of two 32-inch 4K at the time. Now that has been shifting. 32-inch 4K pricing has plummeted. Maybe not plummeted, but like severely decreased, right? Because it would have been in the past, say, for the IPS panels, it would probably have been like $1,200 or so, which is what this, the OLED cost, right? Still back then for the IPS, it would have been that, but it was like $700 for a 27-inch 4K. All I'll say is do not make that compromise. You have to use scaling then, which then effectively removes a lot of the benefit of the 4K display. You want at least a 32-inch for a 4K. I do believe Samsung has come out now, because it always used to be that the lower end on the larger format displays was 42-inch. Like, often it was 42, 48. I believe they have announced like a 38 and maybe even a 36. So if that catches on, some of you that, like, there are coworkers at work that either don't have glasses and maybe need them, or have glasses and maybe don't have the right prescription, that cannot read my 32-inch 4K at native 100%. So maybe they would prefer that 36 or 38. The 42 is too big. Like I get two monitors where I have three. And in this case, those are my LG dual ups. If you're wondering, they have the same PPI pixel density, right, as 32-inch 4K. So they actually go together very well. And I'm quite used to that PPI. So this thing is finally coming into its own. Then we had a recent driver update that made it that they reduced overhead on CPUs. So if you had like a 6-core 5000 series AMD, much more likely to get a lot more frames out of this, than compared to like a, say like a high-end 285K Intel or 14900K Intel, or even a 7800, 9800X3D from AMD, right? because these have a bit more of that tech, and there's a bit more overhead to run them in the driver, right? You are rewarded. Like I said, there's almost no difference in going 1080p to 1440p in a lot of cases. And in some cases, the minimums get more even. What I've seen on some of these benchmarks at 1440p versus 1080. It is really designed for that higher resolution and up. And I think Intel just thought we would be there sooner than we are. But like I said, I would not, unless you are a actual, like, either a pro gamer or attempting to be and actually play in active tournaments, I would not go 1080p. Personally, I wouldn't. Like for the 500 hertz, 600 hertz panels, etc. I wouldn't go 1080p. Or if you need it, this LG Dual Up, or not LG Dual Up, LG 4K Dual Mode, yada yada, 4K 240. Flip it, hit the button on the bottom. It is now 1080p 480. That might be a better situation. They also have a 1440p variant of that, I think at 27 inches, and I forget what it does. But yeah, that might be another thing for you. But realistically, you then have to look like, you're like, oh, 500 hertz is better. Like, getting games to go above like 240, 260, like FPS is an issue. Like I think his GTA 5 is like 180 something, 84 FPS, just cap, and if you actually get near it, it gets like unstable. CS2 is a mess right now. So like realistically, 240 hertz, you know, arguably enough, but I'm not a pro. I also don't stand this far away from my monitor. I'm an arm's length away, which I think is personally the correct distance. So yeah, I picked one of these up, gonna be my secondary display. Could very well, if you guys have a first time, I might recommend you go NVIDIA because you're not gonna run into any issues. Not saying you're running into issues with this, but there's just, I know if you buy an NVIDIA card, it will literally just work for the most part, unless they're starting to have driver issues and stuff like that. But like this, especially early on in its life, you're like, will it run the game? Now we can start checking into some of that, because a lot of monitor games will actually let me choose what graphics card I want to play through what monitor. You know, so we can start benchmarking that, testing it, you know, maybe before I toss it in the desktop. We toss it into Cheapy PC to get some benchmarks. Let me know what you're interested in. But yes, I did swap it out. I had that Onyx one, and I would have kept it, except like I said, it said it was 2 slot or 2 1/4. And I need my 10 gig card. I tried a bunch of shit to not need it. And here's the thing. If you're doing any networking, until you start getting into fiber, and even then you might still go with Intel, if it's not like a ConnectX card, right? You want an Intel. Like, until you get up to, like, we're talking fiber stuff, right? ConnectX 3, ConnectX 5, which I think is now owned by NVIDIA. That's like 25 gig, basically, is when you start worrying about that. Otherwise, anything below that gigabit, 2.5 gig, you'll see a lot of Realtek. Intel should have more budget, like less than 10 gig, but better than gigabit coming. Otherwise, X550 used on, you gotta, there's some stuff you gotta look for. If you guys are interested also in that, hit me up in the Discord or on social media, because they make fakes out there, and you gotta know what you're looking for so you don't get scammed. And you're more likely, actually, and you're like, oh, I'll just go and buy a new one. You basically can't, because Enterprise has, now, there are going to be some low-budget ones. I think Serve the Home or something did an article on it. Intel is finally coming out with, like, a budget variant. It's not of the X550, but it's in that same class that you will then be able to buy new. But any of the new X550s are probably fake, because there are newer generations of cards now, and you're better off actually getting used ones that you like know are legitimate. And yes, sometimes you might get, like, I got one that was water damaged and I got one that was like heat damaged, but that's like 2 out of more than 10. And both those through eBay were just like, yep, here's your money back. We don't even want it back, because they're probably doing them as server pulls at this point. And the one thing you are going to have to do with X550 before you put it into use is update the firmware on it, because the firmware it ships with that most of these are going to be on it's compatible with the 10 gigabit 1 gigabit, and you need it to be on the more modern 10 gigabit standard, and I forget what it's called, but it's the 10.5 2.51 standard, and you just need to hit it with a firmware update and it'll be brilliant. But I need that in there. I've tried almost everything else that starts combining like NVMe slots or more like adding USB-C. All the 10 gigabit chips they have on those are the Aquantia ones, and they're fine. I didn't have any issue, actually, to be truthful, when I was using those going to a Windows, well, I say Windows server, it was actually running Windows Pro for workstations, but I was using SMB from Windows. I didn't have any issues there. Once it came to doing an SMB share from either a FreeBSD based distro or a Linux based distro, the Aquantia cards shit the bed. Like, they just can't. And depending on what sort of switches you're using, right? They may or may not work properly. Depending where you get the cards from, you may or may not. Like the Asus ones, you can't update the firmware to be compatible with Windows 11. Because they didn't brand, you can't get to the chip directly. They brand them as Asus cards instead of Aquantia cards. So the generic firmware update doesn't work. This is also why when you buy the Intel X550s, you buy Intel branded ones, not Dell, not Lenovo, not HP. So you can actually like use them in your desktop that isn't a server from one of those main brands. Yeah, and so that would have been one thing that I could have combined some of my expansion cards in my system by using those, but they're all Aquantia. I've looked at 2 different ones now, and all the other ones that I looked at, like before buying them this time, I was like, what chips are you using? Part of the reason why Aquantia is chosen as well is because apparently it was natively compatible with the Mac Pro. That was actually like the one that Apple included drivers for. Because it is like way cheaper than the Intel route. But yeah, so by doing this, I don't have to take out my nice 10 gig card where I have everything in 10 gig networking. I do 800 megabytes a second minimum to the server, to the home theater PC, to everything. You know, almost everything that can have a 10 gig card at this point has a 10 gig card in it. And GPC, who is an ITX build that I can't put a 10 gig card in, has a 5 gig USB-C adapter. Here we got 2 more. That label right there is quite important. So let me know what you guys think. What do you think about Intel Arc, especially the 2nd gen? You know, B580. I think I waited till it was at $250. I refuse to pay. Like, some of these Gunnier cards were going for $380, which is insane. And yes, these sold out of the gate because they were an amazing deal. They slapped the pants off the 4060. Same thing with what was available on the AMD side. Some of that's caught up a little bit. But Intel has been getting better and better and better with updating the drivers. They now have game-ready drivers. Like I said, their acceleration, I would argue, depending on what you're doing, is actually better than NVIDIA, right? And NVIDIA is the king of that with their NVENC. Well, because a lot of this is built off of what was in the Intel CPUs, it already has inherent support. The issue then becomes, is the software updated because it looks for CPU graphics, and that's not CPU graphics. Some of the stuff has not yet been updated to be like, oh, a dedicated card can run this acceleration. You know, so that's an interesting thing. But AMD, as much as they have the hardware in there, like it's in the chip, and they have dedicated hardware in there nowadays, at least with H.265 and up, nothing uses it. Which doesn't matter that it's there then, right? At least for most things, I can at least use Intel or NVIDIA's acceleration. As much as AMD improves it, what they need to do is they have more of this thought of, if we make it, they'll come, right? Except, what was it? It was like NVIDIA was 74% of all new stuff sold, and now they're like 96% of all new stuff sold. Intel went from being 1% to 0. Yeah. But AMD is the one that really took the hit. And apparently right now it's actually because they can't produce enough cards for the consumers. Because, like, NVIDIA has a much larger market share overall, like even if you include data center GPUs. So they're willing to make more consumer GPUs, right? Because they can. They have more of a share. So, like, even though, like, their percentage, in order for AMD to compete, that's a higher percentage of the silicon that they have made that would have to go to consumers, but they're making way more selling it to AI companies, right? So I think that's where that shift happened. And Intel, until very, very recently, basically had initial great stock. Then it all sold out, prices shot the fuck up, and then until I bought this in July, well, I bought the other one, and then I bought this one. There wasn't stock. Now, like I said, I can go to Best Buy, Newegg, just buy that. So if you're building a $1,200 system, in my opinion, go get yourself a Intel Arc B580. And let me know how it is. See you next one. Peace.